They say when people remove your pictures, they're trying to erase your story. But some stories don't fade, even when the frames do. When I walked into my son's home that day, the walls were full of smiling faces, none of which were mine. My husband's portrait, gone. My parents' wedding photo, gone. Every trace of who we were, erased. And standing there, with her perfect smile, my daughter-in-law said we needed a fresh start. That's when I realized she wanted my family's legacy, but not the woman who built it. Well, she got what she wanted. A fresh start. But not the one she expected. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Old Folks channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood when I returned that morning. Sunlight poured through the window, but something about the room felt colder. I stood in the living room, my eyes scanning the walls I had decorated over 40 years, the frames that once held my family's laughter, their milestones, their love. But now, the wall was bare. No, not bare, replaced. Every picture, every memory, every trace of us was gone, replaced by polished portraits of my son and his wife smiling in places I'd never been. Their happiness felt staged, too perfect, too new. My heart tightened as my fingers brushed against the empty spot where my husband's photo used to hang. A strange thought whispered through my mind, why would she do this? The smile that hid something. At breakfast, I tried to keep my voice calm. "Lena," I said softly, "where are the family photos that were on the wall?" She didn't look up from her cup of tea. "Oh, I thought we could refresh the space. You know, make it more modern." Her tone was light, but her eyes, they didn't match her voice. There was something cold and deliberate behind that smile. My son, Daniel, sat between us, pretending to scroll through his phone, his silence louder than any word. I stared at the woman who called herself my daughter-in-law, wondering when this house had stopped feeling like mine. In that moment, I knew something had changed, not in the decor, but in power. The whisper of dust. Later, when no one was watching, I opened the drawer beneath the cabinet. Inside, buried under napkins and in used candles, I found them, my family photos, wrapped in a plastic bag. My husband's face stared up at me, faded but dignified. My son as a child, covered in mud and laughter. My parents on their wedding day, holding hands. All hidden, as if they were something to be ashamed of. I stood there in the stillness of the evening, the ticking clock echoing in my chest. There was anger, yes, but beneath it, something colder. If she wanted to erase me from this house, I thought, she'd soon learn that I built it. The shadows seemed to listen, waiting. And that's when I decided this wasn't over. The dining table gleamed under the warm light, set perfectly, crystal glasses, polished forks, linen napkins. Lena sat across from me, smiling that polite, practiced smile. Daniel sat between us, chewing quietly, eyes darting from me to her. Every time I tried to speak, she'd interrupt, complimenting the food, asking him about work, changing the subject. The rhythm of the conversation was carefully controlled, by her. The roast grew cold on my plate. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock behind me. I wondered when my own son had become a stranger at my table. A bite too bitter. I raised my glass, breaking the silence. "Daniel, do you remember the summer we built this table together?" His fork paused midair. For a second, he smiled, a real, warm smile. But then Lena spoke softly, "It's such a lovely piece. Maybe we should get a new one, though, something that fits a new style." Her words were smooth as honey but stung like poison. Daniel nodded faintly. "Maybe." That single word echoed through me. I looked at the table, the same one my late husband had sanded by hand. My heart throbbed with anger, not loud, but steady, patient, like an ember waiting for air. The ring that glimmered. As she reached across the table, her hand brushed the candlelight, and I noticed the ring. My mother's ring. A family heirloom. The one I'd given Daniel to keep safe after my husband died. Now, it was on her finger. My breath caught in my throat. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I said nothing, but my silence was sharper than any word. In that glimmer of gold, I saw everything she'd taken, and everything I would reclaim. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard her footsteps echoing softly down the hallway, slow, deliberate, like she wanted me to hear them. I sat up, listening to the floor creak. Then the sound stopped right outside my door. Seconds stretched. The doorknob twitched slightly, once, twice, and then silence. My heart pounded, but I stayed still. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. Only the faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air. Was she testing me, or warning me? The vanishing key. The next morning, my drawer was open. My spare house key was gone. When I asked Daniel, he looked confused. When I asked Lena, she just smiled. Maybe you misplaced it, dear. That word, dear, slithered into my ears like a taunt. Later that day, I found the key on the kitchen counter beside a note that said, "You should rest more." Her handwriting was neat, perfect, almost too perfect. Something about that message wasn't kindness. It was control. The locked drawer. That evening, I tried to unlock the old drawer where I kept family jewelry. The lock had been changed. Every inch of this house that once belonged to me now obeyed her. I stood in the dark, hearing faint laughter from the living room, my son and her, laughing like I never existed. But as the laughter echoed, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to beg for space in my own home. I was going to take it back. While cleaning the attic, I found an old envelope addressed to Daniel, one I had written years ago but never sent. Inside it was a letter from my husband, sealed before he died. It was meant to be passed down to our son when he married. But somehow, it had never been opened. The edges were yellowed, but the wax seal was intact. I hesitated. Should I give it to him now? Or would she take that too? The reading. That night, when Daniel came home, I handed him the letter. "This is from your father," I said softly. He looked startled. "Why are you giving me this now?" Before I could answer, Lena appeared in the doorway. Her smile faltered for a second, just a second, but I saw it. She wanted that letter gone. When Daniel finally opened it, his eyes filled with tears. His father had written, "Never let go of what your mother built for you. This home carries her heart." Lena's smile vanished completely. The silent realization. Later that night, Daniel didn't sit beside her on the couch. He stared at the wall where the photos used to hang. Something was shifting, not loudly, but quietly. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the son I knew. But Lena noticed too. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightened. The war had begun. The morning sun broke through the curtains when I heard their voices, muffled, sharp. Daniel's tone was low but tense. "Why did you remove those photos, Lena?" Her reply came, soft yet cutting, "Because this isn't a museum of her memories. It's our home now." Silence. Then the sound of glass breaking. I rushed out to find a frame shattered on the floor, my wedding photo. The confession. Lena bent to pick up the shards, but I stopped her. "Don't bother," I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes glinting. "It was an accident." I smiled faintly. Some accidents are too well timed. Daniel stood between us, helpless, torn between peace and truth. But the cracks in his loyalty were beginning to show, just like the glass beneath our feet. The glint of revenge. As I swept the pieces into the bin, I noticed something, the ring. It had slipped off her finger during the argument and rolled under the cabinet. I picked it up slowly, turning it in my palm. It felt heavy, like justice waiting. And in that moment, I knew what I would do. That night, while everyone slept, I opened my jewelry box. Inside was another ring, my grandmother's. Identical in design, but not in worth. Lena's ring was gold. This one was brass, polished to shine the same way. I smiled faintly. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need words, only silence and precision. The exchange. The next morning, she left her ring on the dresser while taking a shower. My hands trembled slightly as I made the switch, her diamond for my imitation. When she came out, she slid it on without even noticing. The sight made me almost laugh. The woman who erased my family now wore a piece of metal worth nothing. The ironic toast. At dinner that night, she raised her hand proudly as Daniel complimented the food. The fake ring glistened under the chandelier. I raised my glass, too, meeting her eyes with a faint smile. She thought she'd taken everything from me. But she never realized. I'd already started taking it all back. News travels fast in small towns. People began to whisper about the sudden tension in the house, about Lena's strange behavior. She smiled less now. Her laughter sounded forced. The pressure was getting to her. And every time she glanced at her ring, I could see her wondering. Something felt off. The visit. Her mother visited one afternoon. I overheard their conversation through the thin kitchen door. "Are you sure that's the same ring, dear? It looks dull." Lena laughed nervously. "Of course it is." But her voice wavered. That night, she scrubbed it, polished it, even took it to a jeweler the next day. The realization. When she returned, her face was pale. She didn't speak a word. But her eyes found mine, wide, confused, and furious. She knew. But it was too late. The real ring was gone, and with it, her sense of control. For days, Lena sulked, moving through the house like a storm trapped in human form. Her footsteps echoed with irritation, doors closed harder than necessary. Her eyes, once sweet in pretense, now carried a silent venom, the kind that cuts without a word. Daniel tried to ease the tension, speaking gently, reminding her to let things go. But she wouldn't. Every small thing, a misplaced cup, a lingering glance, a memory she couldn't erase, became another reason to flare up. One evening, as the clock ticked between them, her temper snapped. "Ever since your mother came back," she spat, her voice sharp as broken glass, "everything's falling apart." Her words hung heavy in the air, trembling with accusation. Daniel's face softened, but his tone carried quiet strength. "Maybe it's because we've forgotten who this house belongs to." For the first time since she'd arrived, Lena had no clever retort. Her lips parted, then closed again. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. The truth emerges. The next morning, Daniel wandered into my old study, a place Lena rarely stepped into. Dust motes floated through beams of sunlight, and the faint smell of cedar filled the air. As he opened a drawer to look for something, his hand froze. Beneath a pile of papers lay the forgotten photos, my family's past, hidden but not gone. He lifted each frame carefully, wiping off the dust with his sleeve. There was my wedding photo, my husband's smile, Daniel as a little boy, all pieces of a story that had been stolen from the walls. Slowly, one by one, he began to hang them back. The sound of each nail tapping into the wall was like a heartbeat returning to life. When he placed the last frame, my wedding picture, he turned to me. His eyes shimmered, a thousand emotions fighting to speak. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." And in that moment, something deep inside me broke, not from hurt, but from release. Years of silence, of holding back tears, melted quietly into forgiveness. The silence that followed. Lena stood in the corner, her arms crossed tightly, trying to look unbothered. But her eyes betrayed her, flicking from frame, to faces she could no longer erase. Those walls that once bent to her will now stood against her, alive again with memory. She looked at her hands, one bare, stripped of the ring that had symbolized her false power, and for the first time, her confidence cracked. The shadows on her face deepened, no longer graceful, but fragile. Our eyes met. No words were needed. She knew the balance had shifted. For the first time, she looked afraid. The next morning dawned gray and calm, the sky heavy with clouds. The kitchen felt different, lighter somehow, though quieter. Lena's chair sat empty at the table, her absence echoing louder than her voice ever had. I poured coffee, the soft clink of the spoon against the cup filling the silence that stretched between Daniel and me. He didn't look up for a while. Then, in a tone that carried both relief and sadness, he said, "She's going to her mother's for a while." I simply nodded, not asking when she'd be back. Some departures don't need confirmation, only silence. The air felt still, peaceful, as if the house itself was taking its first deep breath in years. The farewell. When Lena packed her bags, she moved quickly, as though afraid to linger too long among the memories she couldn't erase. Her hands trembled slightly as she zipped her suitcase. She avoided my eyes, her face pale and unreadable. At the door, she paused. Her left hand was bare, the ring gone, her claim to ownership erased as quietly as it had begun. She turned once, her lips parting with a simple word, "Goodbye." "Goodbye," I answered softly. My voice wasn't cold. It carried no anger, no victory. Just calm, the calm that comes when truth no longer needs to shout. She looked as though she wanted to say more, but instead, she left. The sound of the door closing was gentle, final, like the last page of a long, painful chapter. The empty room. After she was gone, the house exhaled, literally seemed to breathe again. The air felt lighter, the rooms no longer tense with unspoken resentment. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, dust swirling in the warmth. I wandered through the hallway, tracing my fingers along the wall where my photos hung. Each frame stood straight, glowing faintly in the morning light. When I reached the last one, slightly tilted, I straightened it with care. Everything was back where it belonged. Weeks passed. Life settled into a quiet rhythm, no shouting, no pretense. Just the hum of the clock and the occasional creak of an old house remembering its peace. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I stumbled upon an old wooden box tucked beneath a dusty quilt. Its hinges creaked as I opened it, revealing velvet fabric and something gleaming faintly beneath, the real ring. It caught the dim light, glowing with a golden warmth that filled the room. I smiled, not with triumph, but serenity. Some things aren't meant to be displayed or flaunted. They are meant to be guarded, cherished. The quiet reflection. That evening, I sat by the window, holding the ring in my palm. The sunset painted the sky in soft hues of amber and rose, and the gold of the ring shimmered like firelight. My reflection in the glass looked older, wiser, and finally at peace. This, I whispered to the quiet room, was never about revenge. The wind stirred the curtains gently, carrying my words into the fading light. It was about remembering what's mine, and protecting what's sacred. I traced the edge of the ring with my thumb, feeling not its weight, but its meaning. Legacy. Memory. Love that endures even through betrayal. The last word. I placed the ring carefully back in its box, wrapped it in the old velvet, and locked it away once more. As I did, the wind outside sighed through the trees, a soft whisper of closure. Downstairs, the clock chimed, steady, strong, alive. For the first time in years, the house felt truly warm again. The shadows still lingered in the corners, yes, but they were mine now. And as I looked around, I realized peace doesn't always arrive with forgiveness. Sometimes it comes quietly, after the storm. In the end, it wasn't about the ring. It was never about the photos either. It was about respect, the kind that should never be taken for granted. She learned that day that beauty fades, but legacy remains. You can hang 1,000 new portraits, but the walls still remember who built them. And as I walked out of that house for the last time, I didn't feel anger, only peace. Because sometimes silence is louder than revenge. And sometimes the sweetest justice is simply watching time reveal the truth.